Funding for Veterans of America, Our Heroes in Uniform, was provided by CSE Federal Credit Union, thanking all veterans who have served or are currently serving. CSE can provide $0 down payment and low closing costs on VA mortgage loans for eligible veterans. By SARTA, where can we take you today? And by the Donovan Veterans Fund.
It is a moment in time that I will never forget. It was the singular moment in time that changed my life the most.
Dr. Chris-Ann Gordon describes what it was like when she suffered a traumatic brain injury in her home. Lost, afraid, confused. Those are her words describing her adventures with PTSD. And those are some of the same words that her patients, veterans, use to describe their PTSD.
Well, at first it was kind of just an internal struggle. But then when things started to calm down, I noticed that it was more than just memory, my speech. Like my speech is more mumbly. My brain, it's more muscle memory. So I usually don't know what I'm going to say until it already happens and I react to it.
Dr. Gordon, once an emergency room physician and now, since her traumatic brain injury, a clinical physician, uses her skills in that arena that led to her research on PTSD, has written about her ordeal in her book called Turn the Lights On. She knows firsthand what it's like to have a traumatic brain injury.
I was pushing Christmas decorations underneath a crawl space and literally hit the top of my head against a brick wall. And it was unlike any force, any bang to the head I'd ever experienced, and I knew I was going to go out. And as I kind of flopped back onto the floor, I remember just seeing everything start going dark. It went from light to dimmer, and I felt as if my entire body was just floating down a very deep, dark lake. And the light kept getting dimmer and dimmer until it was gone. And I do remember feeling as though I was on the bottom of this very deep lake, no sound, no feeling, no light. And I wondered even at that moment, was I ever going to come out of this?
CDC defines a traumatic brain injury, or TBI, as a disruption in the normal function of the brain that can be caused by a bump, blow, or jolt to the head or penetrating head injury. While post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is a psychiatric disorder that can occur in people who have experienced or witnessed a traumatic event, such as a natural disaster, a serious accident, terrorist act, war or combat, rape, or other violent personal assault.
So it's like trying to drive your car, but drive it from the back seat. You know, you can still see out the windshield and you know who you're talking to, but you don't have as much control, or it feels abnormal.
There are varying degrees of PTSD. It may be obvious in some cases that some veterans may be struggling with PTSD.
So the difference between traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder is the fact that the traumatic brain injury has less of a kind of retro phase. The post-traumatic stress disorder kind of replays the incident that led to that brain injury. And we can't forget that post-traumatic stress disorder has been a proven form of brain injury. It's kind of a subset of brain injury. And people like myself who had pure traumatic brain injury, I was putting up Christmas decorations. So the fact that some of the symptoms associated with PTSD, such as fear of crowds and hypervigilance and not liking loud noises and kind of the startle reflex, I had those too. And that's when I finally went to a couple of our great researchers like Michael Lipton in Albert Einstein at the Bronx. He's MD, PhD, and said, you know, this is me. I was pure traumatic brain injury, and I have these effects too because I had some of that chemical reverberation of what happened to me at the time. The biggest effects of traumatic brain injury and the most common symptom is photophobia. And that is, you know, since your eyes aren't working really properly to filter out light, you bring too much in. There's usually an effect with cognition, and that is many times people would be talking and that kind of stutter and search for their words. And I was like that for 6 months after I began talking again. You can't kind of connect all the dots as fluently as we do now. So for anybody out there who is struggling with that right now, let me tell you that can get better with time, as I'm trying to show you right now. The memory, you know, that's pretty much traumatic brain injury, not as much as PTSD. Being able to remember forward or being able to remember backward, because so many parts of the brain are affected, so many of the connections are broken, that until you either re-establish those connections or build new corrections around them, you cannot gain your sensibility to speak fluently, to think fluently, and to answer questions coherently on a routine basis.
There's a study on traumatic brain injury, a very reputable study that Dr. Gordon and her veterans participated in. It's called the Lipton Study.
So Dr. Lipton and his team kind of devised this study. And what he said is we want to take young people, young men back from the war who have had a blast injury. But we can't just check them with a lot of testing. Blood testing to check for genetic markers, blood testing to check for any other like fragments of proteins that may be in their system, the diffusion tensor imaging, neuropsychiatry. I mean, he did a lot of study in this beautiful protocol. He says, well, I need about 22 to 25 of your guys, and I need their age-matched sibling that has not gone to war and not had a traumatic brain injury, because we want to prove that this isn't just a genetic thing. We want to prove that as close as we could get their age group to them, they don't have the same findings.
We got assistance to get a few veterans to go to get the diffusion tensor imaging, which sounds crazy, but when you know, the layman's part of it is that versus an MRI is like being able to do 3D, actually seeing how the brain operates as it's operating, rather than like, here's what the brain looked like when we took a black and white picture. They were actually able to see, you know, if my right brain and my left brain were communicating, was there any holes, or there pieces missing, you know, whatever it could be. We were actually able to get answers. Now if somebody's like, hey, guess what, you do have a brain injury, and this is why you may be experiencing some of your issues. And that was like, I wasn't excited that I found out that I had a brain injury, but it was like, that explains a lot. You know, it was like, and I haven't felt that, you know, in like 7 years.
The problem that Dr. Gordon had was how to pay for the veterans and their siblings to go to Washington, D.C. for the study. So she turned to other veterans, starting with Big Daddy Cool.
Our very first year with Resurrecting Lives, we raised $18,000. That enabled Dr. Gordon to take 5 Richland County veterans to New York, to fly them to New York for Albert Einstein University and be diagnosed for traumatic brain injury.
We were very blessed to have a group of AMVETS Post 26 in Mansfield, Ohio, who I took this idea to because there were several of our young veterans in this area of Mansfield where we're filming today. And I said, you know, we really need to do this study. They had Rock and Roll Fest, they had bake sales, they had auctions. And I will tell you, of the 22 young men and their age-matched siblings that we sent to Albert Einstein in the Bronx, they funded 8 of them. So this was, at the very beginning, a grassroots, people saying, we want to help our veterans who are, we appreciate what they've done, we're going to do something about it. And then to have a group of patriots there in this little campus on the Bronx saying, we're going to take it from here.
What are some of the symptoms that some veterans with PTSD experience?
The thing that bothered me and bothered those around me was I had anger issues, and I knew they didn't make sense. Things would just set me off just boom, and I would become very upset, and it would go as fast as it came, but it was just a very scary event for those around me because it wasn't my normal nature.
When he first came home, everybody was so worried about the physical problems, his legs. He had a blow-through wound in one leg, and he had a titanium rod that had to be placed in his other leg. They were so worried about his legs and getting them healed so that they didn't have to be amputated, that all of the other injuries were masked by the physical injuries that were being treated. So once those physical injuries were kind of on the back burner and he was able to get up and walk and he was able to do things on his own physically, then we started noticing, well, wait a minute, we still have problems. He would forget people's names that he's known for a long time. People who he had just met, he would never remember their names. He would forget how to get to and from places.
Is there a cure for PTSD? And what are some of the treatments, traditional and non-traditional, that many physicians are using to treat PTSD? And is there a difference between recovery and cure?
When we talk about traditional forms of treatment for TBI and PTSD, we're primarily talking about 10 years ago, everything was drug related. I mean, take a pill, that's kind of the American way, right? Take a pill. What happened with post-traumatic stress disorder is you take one pill and then you take another prescription, then you take another. So at one point in time, most of the young people that I was seeing were on at least 19 different pills a day. So we're taking a very young, healthy population, physically healthy. These are the most physically fit people we have in our country right now. And now they're drugged to a certain degree, and many of these drugs, as Colonel Bart Billings, PhD, he was a psychologist in the Vietnam era, and just as a staunch believer, the medications were actually keeping the brain from being able to be jump-started again. I have to say, you've got to re-jump-start that brain. So there may be some medications that people may have to take brain-related for a very short period of time, and I like very small doses with small dose increments, and check the person frequently while you are trying to retrain their brain. And you do it, first of all, with vision. Again, people with mild traumatic brain injury have trouble with converging and diverging, looking in, looking out, looking in, focusing, being able to track. All of those particular things that we take for granted. I mean, we just think that's part of seeing. They have to relearn. And so the old tradition was about 3% of any of the veterans ever got to that therapy, binocular vision therapy. We are right now working on a software program that will allow our veterans to be able to do that at home, 15 to 20 minutes an hour, several hours a day, just like I brought back my brain. Then you go on from the vision, then you can go on to reading, understanding, cognition, because you can't read and understand what you can't properly see. And this has been a revolutionary idea, believe it or not. And then lastly, you work on balance. We are trying to take the care of our young veterans into their homes, into like the VA outpatient centers, into places like the University of Akron telehealth initiative that they have going on in the American Legion office there. Bring it to them. In the tradition of rehab, you drive to a rehab center, which takes you an hour or 2 hours, and you sit around and wait, and you go through an hour of therapy, and then you drive back, and you may do that 3 times a week. That is not enough to retrain the brain. First of all, your brain is drained. It's not really able to take in a whole lot of information after this kind of injury after about 20 minutes. It fatigues, it shuts down. Those chemicals are gone, they've been used up. So using it at 15 to 20 minute increments, using it for the warrior themselves, for the patient themselves, maybe with the help of the family, maybe with the help of caregivers, that would be really very helpful as well, telehealth. We are bringing the rehab to them. We're bringing it in smaller increments more frequently, and we're allowing them to challenge the brain and relearn it 7 days a week.
And what are some of the more non-traditional treatments for PTSD?
The transcendental meditation technique, for all the things that it does, slows the body down to a level of rest as deep as sleep. And we do this about 20 minutes twice a day. So you go as deep as sleep, and then even in the first week of meditating, most meditators are able to go twice as deep as the deepest point of sleep. And so that kind of rest is unheard of. Scientists are having a wonderful time with it because they can document that very easily, slowing the heart down, the breathing, and the whole metabolic changes that happen produce a kind of profound rest that's able to knock loose stresses that sleep can't get rid of.
I felt like my brain and my thoughts were always drifting. I constantly was catching myself mentally being someplace from my past. You know, being in the combat zone, being in high stress situations, being agitated, but not because of what was happening around me, but because of something that had happened in the past. And so when it comes to transcendental meditation, it's something that I recommend people try. I recommend they think about doing it. I recommend them looking at it as another weapon in their arsenal of ways of dealing with PTSD, ways of dealing with TBI, and ways of dealing with, you know, for non-combat veterans, just life. Life is stressful. Life has got many different stressors to it. If you're married, you have a spouse. If you have kids, then you have a family. You've got an employer that you have to deal with. You've got aspects of work that don't always go your way. Life is full of challenges. How do you deal with it? So with TM, I found myself having a calmer brain. I found myself more in the moment and being able to be less agitated. And that's just the beginning of it. I mean, there's so many more positive aspects that it's hard to put into words, but you definitely feel the benefits.
One of the main symptoms of post-traumatic stress is stress, and that shows itself up in its musculoskeletal system. That chiropractors can help alleviate the physical stress by adjusting the spine, alleviating the pressure on the nerves that go to those muscles. But post-traumatic stress is multifaceted. It's just not the physical attributes, it's the mental attributes. I mean, we have 22 of our veterans killing themselves every day. Some of that is post-traumatic stress related, it's pain related, it's a combination of both. And some of the medications they're taking, they figure out the 22, 1/3 are directly related to the medications they're taking. Opioids, the veterans are more likely to die of opioid overdose, twice as likely than a civilian. Everyone who goes isn't shot or blown up, but they all come back different from war.
But this is a fabulous facility for veterans to come and really just interact with the horses and brush them, just walk them, be with them, and this is a healing place.
There's just such a positive feeling with everything that goes on here. And I think a lot of our men and women who have served, you know, who may have post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, maybe a substance abuse, maybe just anxiety and depression, they come in here and they find that hope through the horses. We work a lot on growth. So we're looking at post-traumatic growth, and we want to see and be here and be present for them, because our suicide rate is 20 a day of our veterans and service members. And with that one interaction and us being here for them, and you know, we will open up the doors to all so that we can help them.
So a typical session, the child or participant or even our veterans, now they're going to come, and typically what we do over at Whispering Grace, we have them do a chore with us. So that might mean picking up our pastures or our stalls, making sure our horses have water, that kind of thing. And then we play with our horses. So whether that means working on exercises with our horses, working through you know, things that come up when our relationship with the horse that we've been working with, working through those things, or it could be just playing. So I mean, like brushing our horses, we do a lot of that. Sometimes I spend my whole hour with my session person just braiding a mane or painting our horses, just fun things like that.
They'll be coming here, and we're going to make this as simple, as simplistic as we can. Because in actuality, as irrational as this sounds, horses and some of our men and women that have served think alike. They're not too interested in tomorrow. It's kind of a, what can you do for me today? And we want to make a day a great day for individuals that come here and spend time with our horses. And what our horses have given back to families and to others is just simply amazing.
I really, really love alternative treatments for TBI and PTSD, and my only caveat is that cannot be or should not be the only treatment. There should be at least some medical input, a baseline as to where your brain is now, and then a devised protocol specific for your injury and your deficits that can be taken out under the care of physical medicine specialists, rehab specialists, people who are occupational medicine, therapists, physical therapists, speech and hearing therapists. That arm can never not be there, okay? The alternative therapies, such as equine therapy, are very excellent at calming down the brain, at that hypervigilance that we get after a brain injury. Because interestingly enough, I mean, horses really do sense what is going on, and they're very good at adjusting to the grip of someone who's in a hypervigilant state and kind of easing them into less grip, into getting to know them, into getting to help them move, because as the horse is walking, it's actually moving the person as well. Their brain is getting information as to where all their limbs are in space or time. It becomes very helpful with that. I love the alternative therapies.
Research and technology are helping in the battle of PTSD and TBI. And as you can see, there are some real soldiers marching at the front of the charge. And Dr. Chris-Ann Gordon, herself a past victim of TBI, is a 4-star general helping to lead that charge.
We've been very blessed. Again, Resurrecting Lives Foundation is a very grassroots. We didn't have any big donor. We just had, here's the problem. We've got about 750,000 young men and women from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan coming back now with mild traumatic brain injury or PTSD. Here's the solution. We have to get communities involved. And the ways that we need to, first of all, and I'm really very happy with the recent expansion of the CHOICE Act, which allows our veterans to seek healthcare services outside the VA if they live more than 40 miles away, or if those particular specialties aren't at their particular VA. That is huge, and that's getting the community medical centers involved. Only 8 to 10% of all physicians or healthcare providers in the United States of America ever take care of traumatic brain injury. With only 8 to 10%, you cannot expect them to be at every VA, but they are in every community, or they can be linked to every community. So that is one huge effort. The second effort is to get employers. I really want employers and HR departments to understand that these young men and women fought for our country. These almost 90% of every person who I've spoken to, and I ask them, why? Why did you join the all-voluntary military? And 90% of them will answer, because I saw the towers go down. They joined to help unify not only the United States of America, but the world. You cannot leave that person behind. So when they go to war, or maybe just in training, they sustain traumatic brain injuries, PTSD. I mean, we've got guys jumping out of, helicopters and airplanes and the airborne and the Rangers. They get concussions in training. What you can do as an employer, say, okay, here's what we want to do. We have a veterans group within our employment, and they will keep track of you, and they will be a mentor for you. And we can help you maybe ease into this job a little better lighting for you, dimmers, little thing for sound, cut down on the sound. We won't have people all around you so that you're constantly trying to look at your back and see what's going on. Just few adjustments like that, and that needs to be done in the community. I love community educations where the military children are going, where the spouses may be going, in institutions such as the churches, the schools, the community centers, anything to let these folks know that you are welcome back home. I think now is the time. I think no matter what party you are, no matter what you believe, no matter what your ethnicity is, you are behind the people who defend your rights as Americans. And I believe this is the one singular cause that we could all wrap our arms around. And if we do wrap our arms around it, if we do bring these veterans and their families back into communities, they will serve us proudly in the communities and be our leaders in the communities as they were in harm's way. That's why our motto is resurrect a hero, strengthen a nation. I think now is the time to unite America. Our all-voluntary military is the most diverse population we have in our nation. Let's get behind it as a nation.
We've seen that TBI and PTSD are real, and we've seen what some of the symptoms can be. We've seen how they can affect our veterans and their families. But our veterans have also seen that hope and help are strong allies in this war, because after all, PTSD means they are out of their brains, not out of their minds.
As you go on and you reconnect the pathways, as you learn to speak, as you learn to see, as you learn to read, the light gets brighter and brighter until finally you're back to a new steady state. It may not be the same brain you had, but you know the very moment you start making strides, as you start coming out of that eye of the hurricane, until suddenly you get bright sunlight again.
Funding for Veterans of America, Our Heroes in Uniform, was provided by CSE Federal Credit Union, thanking all veterans who have served or are currently serving. CSE can provide $0 down payment and low closing costs on VA mortgage loans for eligible veterans. By SARTA, Where Can We Take You Today? And by the Donovan Veterans Fund.